The great chamber of the Galactic Council stretched out like a cathedral made of light and metal. 12 different species sat in their designated sections, each one representing billions of lives across hundreds of worlds. The ceiling rose so high that clouds of vapor sometimes formed near the top, and the walls displayed live feeds from 1,000 different planets. It was meant to inspire awe, to remind everyone who entered that they stood before the most powerful governing body in known space. Ambassador. Catherine Moore had stopped being impressed by it years ago. She stood at the human delegation podium, a small island of polished wood and a sea of alien architecture. At 53 years old, she had spent more than half her life in diplomatic service. She had negotiated trade deals, resolved border disputes, and talked hostile parties back from the edge of war more times than she could count. Her gray-streaked brown hair was pulled back in a simple knot, and she wore the dark blue uniform of the Terran diplomatic corps without any decorations or medals. She believed in letting her words speak for themselves. Today, however, she sensed that words might not be enough. High Speaker Zirith of the Valtheri Dominion rose from his elevated platform at the center of the chamber. The Valtheri were tall, thin beings with skin that glowed faintly from within. Patterns of bioluminescent light pulsed across their bodies, conveying emotions and emphasis that their flat, monotone voices could not. Right now, Zyrith's skin blazed with bright blue patterns that Catherine had learned to associate with triumph and contempt. The Council has reached a decision regarding the human question, Zyrith announced. His voice echoed through the chamber, amplified by hidden speakers. After extensive deliberation and careful consideration of all evidence presented, we have voted unanimously on the following resolution. Catherine felt her stomach tighten. Unanimous votes were rare in the Council. The 12-member species almost never agreed on anything, which was usually good for humanity. Division among the aliens meant opportunity for Earth, but a unanimous vote meant something had changed. Something had united them. Humanity has expanded too rapidly, Zyrith continued. In just 300 years, your species has colonized 24 star systems. You have built shipyards capable of producing vessels at a rate that exceeds all projections. You have developed weapons technology that you have refused to share with the Council. You have declined repeated invitations to join the Mutual Defense Pact. Catherine wanted to point out that the Mutual Defense Pact would have required humanity to share all military technology and submit to Council oversight of their fleet. She wanted to remind the chamber that humanity had been peaceful neighbors for 3 centuries, had traded fairly, had honored every agreement. But she held her tongue. This was not a debate. This was a sentencing. Therefore, Zirith said, his skin now pulsing with deep purple satisfaction. The Council is determined that humanity represents a potential threat to galactic stability. You are hereby ordered to immediately cease all military production. You will surrender your colonial holdings beyond the Sol system to Council administration. You will reduce your fleet to no more than 50 vessels, to be used only for system defense and transport. You will accept permanent monitoring stations in orbit around Earth and all remaining human worlds. The chamber was absolutely silent. Catherine could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. You have 30 standard cycles to comply with these terms, Zyrith finished. Failure to do so will result in unified military action by the combined fleets of the Galactic Council. This is not negotiable. This is not a request. This is the will of the Council. Catherine looked around the chamber. The Krellian ambassador, a massive reptilian creature with 4 arms, stared straight ahead and refused to meet her gaze. The SEN representative, an insectoid being with compound eyes that usually sparkled with curiosity, had turned away entirely. Even the Mundari delegation, who had been humanity's closest allies for 2 centuries, sat in uncomfortable silence. Does the human delegation wish to respond? Zirith asked, and Catherine could hear the mockery in his flat voice. She picked up her data tablet slowly, buying herself a moment to think. Her mind raced through possibilities and scenarios. She thought about the classified briefings she had received before taking this posting, things that even most humans didn't know about their own military capabilities. She thought about her daughter back on Earth, about the life that 20 billion humans had built across 24 worlds. "I will convey your terms to my government," Catherine said. Her voice was steady, calm, almost pleasant. "Earth will respond within the allotted time." She saw surprise flicker across several alien faces. They had expected pleading, perhaps, or anger, or desperate negotiations. They had not expected quiet acceptance. Catherine turned and walked out of the chamber without another word. Her footsteps echoed in the sudden stillness, each click of her heels sharp and precise. She did not look back. The moment she was aboard the diplomatic vessel Horizon's Edge, she sealed herself in the communications room and opened a secure channel to Earth, the face of defense. Secretary Marcus Cole appeared on the screen within seconds. He was a heavy-set man in his 60s with a shaved head and deep lines around his eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. "We monitored the whole session," Cole said without preamble. "The president is already convening the War Council." "They think we're going to fold," Catherine replied. "They've watched us play the friendly newcomers for so long that they've convinced themselves it's all we know how to do." Cole nodded slowly. "The Council Intelligence Services have been very thorough. They've counted every ship in our public registry. They've cataloged every weapon system we've officially acknowledged. They believe they have a complete picture of Terran military strength." "Do they?" It was not a question. "They think we have 800 combat-capable vessels, mostly older patrol craft and a few modern cruisers," Cole said. "They think our industrial capacity maxes out at about 50 ships per year. They think our weapons technology is roughly equivalent to the Athesians, maybe slightly better in a few areas." Catherine allowed herself a small, cold smile. "And how accurate is that assessment?" Cole's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "Ambassador, the Lazarus Protocol has been active for 170 years. The Council has no idea what's been hiding in our asteroid belts, our gas giant moons, our deep space installations. They have no idea what the Terran Empire is actually capable of." "Good," Catherine said. "Then when the time comes, they'll learn." She ended the communication and sat alone in the quiet room for a long moment. Through the viewport, she could see the lights of the council station, thousands of windows glittering like stars. Somewhere in there, alien diplomats were probably already celebrating their victory over the upstart humans. Catherine thought about something her grandfather had told her when she was young. He had been a history teacher, fascinated by the wars and conflicts that had shaped humanity before they reached the stars. "The most dangerous enemy," he had said, "is the one who smiles while you point a gun at their head, because that enemy knows something you don't." Catherine smiled and began composing her official report to Earth. The game had changed, but humanity had been preparing for this moment for a very long time. The Council wanted to threaten Earth. They had no idea what they had just awakened, the United Terran. Congress met in an underground chamber 300 meters beneath the Rocky Mountains. The original building in Washington had been preserved as a museum, a reminder of the days when humanity had been confined to a single world. The real work of governing an interstellar empire happened here, in a facility that could withstand nuclear strikes, asteroid impacts, and orbital bombardment. President Daniel Hayes stood at the central podium, looking out at the assembled representatives of humanity's 24 colony worlds. He was 61 years old, tall and lean, with silver hair, and the kind of face that people instinctively trusted. He had been a school teacher before entering politics, and he still had the patient, a measured way of speaking that had served him well in both careers. 312 years ago, he began, humanity launched its first interstellar vessel. We were scared, hopeful, and completely unprepared for what we would find. We discovered that the galaxy was already full of life, full of ancient civilizations that had been traveling between stars for thousands of years before we learned to make fire. He paused, letting the weight of history settle over the chamber. We could have been conquered then. We could have been enslaved, exterminated, or simply ignored. Instead, we were welcomed. The Galactic Council offered us trade, technology, and a place among the stars. We accepted gratefully, and for 3 centuries we have been good neighbors. We have kept our promises. We have traded fairly. We have never started a war. His voice hardened slightly. And yesterday, that same council voted to strip away everything we have built. They have demanded that we surrender our colonies, disarm our fleet, and accept foreign soldiers on our homeworld. They have given us 30 days to comply or face destruction. A murmur ran through the chamber. Most of the representatives had already been briefed, but hearing it stated so plainly still carried shock. I have a message for the Galactic Council, Hayes continued. Humanity does not surrender. Humanity does not kneel. And humanity does not forget who its friends are, or its enemies. He touched a control on his podium, and a holographic display sprang to life above his head. It showed a map of Terran space, the 24 stars that humanity called home. For 170 years, every Terran government has contributed to a secret defense program called the Lazarus Protocol. We hoped we would never need it. We prayed that the galaxy would remain at peace. But we prepared for the worst, because that is what humans do. We survive, we adapt, we overcome. The map changed, revealing thousands of hidden symbols scattered throughout Terran territory. Secret shipyards, hidden weapons platforms, underground factories, concealed fleets waiting in the darkness between stars. The Council believes we have 800 ships. They are wrong. The number appeared on the display, 4,847. The chamber erupted in shocked exclamations. Hayes let the noise continue for a moment before raising his hand for silence. These are not patrol boats or cargo haulers. These are warships, built in secret over the course of nearly 2 centuries. Every generation of Terrans has contributed to this program without knowing its full scope. Every tax, every budget allocation, every seemingly wasteful government project has fed into this hidden arsenal. He looked directly into the cameras that would broadcast his words to every human world. To the people of Earth and her colonies. I say this, do not be afraid. Your government has not been idle. Your ancestors were not naive. We knew this day might come, and we prepared. Far from Earth, in the Proxima Centauri system, Admiral Grace Bennett received her orders aboard the flagship Constellation. She was a small woman with short gray hair and sharp brown eyes that missed nothing. She had joined the Terran Navy at 18 and worked her way up through 43 years of service. She had commanded patrol vessels, cruisers, and carrier groups. She had trained thousands of officers and written the tactical doctrines that the entire fleet used. And she had spent the last 15 years commanding the secret First Fleet. Waiting for a war she hoped would never come, came the Lazarus Protocol. She ordered her executive officer, Captain Henry Wallace. He was a younger man, barely 40, with the kind of calm competence that Bennett valued above all other qualities. I, Admiral. Transmitting activation codes now. Across Terran space, hidden installations received the signal. In the asteroid belt of the Kepler 442 system, doors that hadn't opened in decades slid apart, revealing rows of warships floating in perfect formation. In orbit around a gas giant in the Tau Ceti system, what appeared to be an abandoned mining station began powering up weapon systems that could crack a planet. In deep space, far from any star, massive carrier vessels that officially didn't exist came online and began launching. Fighters from their hidden bays, Bennett watched the reports flow in, each one confirming that another piece of the puzzle was falling into place. The Council had 30,000 ships in their combined fleet. They thought that was enough to crush humanity. They had no idea that they were walking into a trap that had been set before most of them were born. Admiral Wallace said, "We're receiving reports that Council scout ships have been detected near the border. They appear to be monitoring our space for signs of military activity." Bennett smiled thinly. "Good. Let them look. They won't see anything we don't want them to see." The First Fleet remained hidden, powered down, and silent. To Council sensors, it would appear as nothing more than rocks and debris. The same was true for the Second, Third, Fourth, and Fifth Fleets. Each one concealed in a different part of Terran territory, each one waiting for the signal to emerge. Back on Nexus Prime, Ambassador Catherine Moore attended a diplomatic reception as if nothing had changed. She made small talk with alien dignitaries, complimented the Veshan ambassador on her elegant wing decorations, da-da, and laughed politely at a Krellian joke that wasn't really funny. Council intelligence officers watched her closely. Looking for any sign of panic or preparation, they saw only a woman who seemed resigned to her species' fate. "Your government has been very quiet," the Valkyrie ambassador remarked, sliding up beside her with a drink in one tentacle. "We expected more resistance, more negotiation, more begging." Catherine sipped her wine and smiled pleasantly. "What would be the point? You've made your position clear. We're simply taking time to consider our options." "You have no options," the ambassador replied smugly. "You can surrender or be destroyed. Those are your only choices." Catherine looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "Perhaps," she said finally. "We'll see." She excused herself and returned to her quarters aboard the human diplomatic vessel. Once she was alone, she opened a secure channel to Admiral Bennett. "They're completely confident," Catherine reported. "They have no idea what's coming." Bennett nodded. "Good. We'll keep it that way until the last possible moment. When they cross into our space, they'll think they're facing a defeated enemy. By the time they realize the truth, it will be too late." "How many of them will die?" Catherine asked quietly. "As many as it takes," Bennett replied. "They chose this. We tried peace for 300 years. They're the ones who decided it wasn't enough." Catherine ended the call and sat in silence for a long time, staring at the stars outside her window. War was coming. Millions would die on both sides. The galaxy would never be the same, but humanity would survive. That was the only thing that mattered now. 25 days had passed since the Council issued its ultimatum, and the galaxy held its breath. On Nexus Prime, alien diplomats discussed the coming war as if it were already won. In the Council military headquarters, admirals and generals from 12 different species planned their invasion routes and argued about who would claim which human colony. The Valkyrie wanted Earth itself. The Krellians had their eyes on the mineral-rich systems near Tau Ceti. Even the Mondari, who had once called humanity their friends, had quietly submitted their list of territorial claims. None of them knew that they were being watched, Commander. Lisa Murphy sat in the darkness of her ship, the silent running holding perfectly still. Her vessel was a stealth cruiser, one of the most advanced ships in the Terran fleet, designed to be invisible to every sensor technology known to galactic science. For the past 3 weeks, she had been drifting in the outer regions of the Nexus system, gathering intelligence on Council fleet movements. Another battle group just arrived, her sensor officer, Lieutenant Kevin Park, reported in a whisper. Even though they were completely undetectable, old habits died hard. "That makes 42,000 ships total." Murphy nodded slowly. "Mark their positions and transmit to Fleet Command. Admiral Bennett will want to know exactly what we're facing." The silent running wasn't alone. 17 other stealth ships were scattered throughout Council space, watching and waiting. They had mapped every patrol route, identified every command vessel, and cataloged every weakness in the enemy formation. When the war began, the Terran fleet would know exactly where to strike, far away. On the colony world of New Virginia, Governor Samuel Green stood on the balcony of his office and watched the sun set over the eastern plains. New Virginia had been his home for 30 years, ever since he had arrived as a young engineer to help terraform the planet. He had married here, raised 3 children here, buried his wife here. The red soil of this world was in his blood, and now he might have to watch it burn. A soft chime from his desk announced the arrival of a priority message. Green walked inside and opened the secure channel to find the face of President Hayes looking back at him. "Governor," Hayes said, "I'm sending you the final version of the contingency plans. You need to review them and be ready to act on my signal." Green downloaded the files and began reading. His face grew paler with each page. "Sir," he said slowly, "this calls for the complete evacuation of the civilian population to the underground shelters. We're talking about 200 million people." "I know," Hayes replied. "We're sending similar orders to every colony. If the Council breaks through our defensive lines, we need to be able to protect our people until reinforcements arrive. And if reinforcements don't arrive..." Hayes was silent for a moment. Then we hold out as long as we can. Humanity has survived ice ages, plagues, and nuclear war. We've rebuilt from the edge of extinction before. If necessary, we'll do it again. Green nodded slowly. He thought about his children, all three of them serving in the Terran Navy now. He thought about his grandchildren, still too young to understand what was happening. He thought about all the dreams that humanity had carried to the stars, all the hope that had driven them to build new worlds in the darkness. "We'll be ready, sir," he said. "I know you will." "Good luck, Governor." The channel closed and Green began issuing orders. Emergency shelters that had been sealed for decades were opened and prepared. Food supplies were moved underground. Medical facilities were relocated to bunkers that could withstand orbital bombardment. The people of New Virginia went about their preparations quietly, without panic, trusting that their government knew what it was doing. This same scene played out on every human world. 24 colonies, each one preparing for the worst while hoping for the base. Aboard the Constellation, Admiral Bennett held her final briefing with the senior officers of the combined Terran fleet. The conference room was crowded with holographic displays showing every detail of the coming battle. "The Council fleet will enter our space here," Bennett said, pointing to a spot on the map. "They'll take the Kepler transit corridor because it's the fastest route to Earth. That's where we'll hit them." Admiral Christopher Lane, commander of the Third Fleet, leaned forward. He was a large man with a booming voice and a reputation for aggressive tactics. "The corridor is narrow. If we catch them in there, they won't be able to maneuver." "Exactly," Bennett replied. "We've been positioning our forces for weeks. The First and Second Fleets will hide in the nebulae on either side of the corridor. When the Council fleet is fully committed to the passage, we'll close the trap." Captain Murphy's face appeared on one of the screens transmitting from the silent running. "Admiral, our latest intelligence shows that Supreme Commander Thaxis will be leading the invasion personally. His flagship, the Eternal Dominion, will be at the center of the formation." Bennett's eyes narrowed. "Good. If we can take out their command ship early, the rest of their fleet will fall into chaos." "What about the Mondari?" asked Admiral Patricia Cole of the Fourth Fleet. She was the youngest flag officer in the room, barely 50, but she had earned her position through brilliant tactical thinking. "They were our allies for 2 centuries. Do we really want to kill them alongside the others?" Bennett's expression hardened. The Mondari had a choice. They could have stood with us, or at least remained neutral. Instead, they voted for our destruction and filed claims on our territory. They're not our allies anymore. They're our enemies. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what that meant. When the battle began, there would be no mercy, no distinction between species. Anyone who raised weapons against humanity would be destroyed. "Final orders will be transmitted in 48 hours, Bennett concluded. "Until then, maintain radio silence and stay hidden. The Council thinks we're already beaten. Let's keep them thinking that until it's too late." The officers filed out, each one returning to their ship to prepare their crews for war. Bennett remained alone in the conference room, staring at the holographic map. She thought about all the young men and women under her command, many of them barely out of training. She thought about the enemy ships filled with aliens who probably believed they were doing the right thing, protecting the galaxy from a dangerous species. She thought about all the death that was coming, all the grief and anger and sorrow that would follow. "I'm sorry," she whispered to no one in particular. "I wish there had been another way. But there wasn't. The Council had made sure of that. They had decided that humanity needed to be controlled, contained, reduced to something small and harmless. They had refused to see humans as equals, as partners, as fellow travelers in the great darkness between stars. Now they would learn the truth. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was not harmless. Humanity had spent 3 centuries learning how to smile and shake hands and play the diplomatic game, but beneath that civilized exterior, humans were still the same creatures who had clawed their way to the top of the food chain on Earth, the same creatures who had survived every disaster nature could throw at them, the same creatures who had looked up at the stars and decided against all odds to reach them. The Council wanted war. They were about to find out what that really meant. Bennett turned off the displays and headed to the bridge. In 2 days, the deadline would expire. In 3 days, the Council fleet would cross into Terran space. In 4 days, the galaxy would change forever. The Galactic Council Armada was the largest military force ever assembled in recorded history. 42,000 warships from 12 different species stretched across millions of kilometers of space, their engines blazing like a river of stars. Dreadnoughts the size of small moons floated alongside sleek cruisers and swarms of fighters. Supply ships carried enough ammunition and provisions to sustain operations for years. Hospital vessels stood ready to treat the wounded, though most commanders expected very few casualties. After all, they were facing a species with only 800 ships. This would not be a war. It would be an execution. Supreme Commander Thaxus stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching the fleet advance through Terran space. He was a Krellian, a massive reptilian creature standing nearly 3 meters tall, with 4 powerful arms and scales that gleamed like polished bronze. He had spent 60 years rising through the ranks of the Krellian Star Navy, and this campaign would be the crowning achievement of his career. "Report," he ordered, his deep voice rumbling through the bridge. "No sign of enemy resistance." "Supreme Commander," his tactical officer replied. "Long-range sensors show minimal activity in the systems ahead. The humans appear to be retreating toward their core worlds." Thaxus allowed himself a thin smile. "Cowards. They talk of independence and sovereignty, but when faced with real power, they run and hide." "Perhaps they hope to negotiate," his second-in-command suggested. "They may be gathering at Earth to sue for peace. Then they will be disappointed. The Council has authorized the complete subjugation of human space. There will be no negotiations. Only submission or destruction." The fleet continued its advance, pushing deeper into Terran territory with each passing hour. They passed abandoned outposts and empty stations, finding no resistance anywhere. Scout ships reported that the famous Terran fleet was nowhere to be seen. Intelligence officers suggested that the humans might have scattered their forces to protect individual colonies, spreading themselves too thin to mount any meaningful defense. On the 3rd day of the invasion, the Armada reached the Kepler Transit Corridor. The corridor was a narrow passage between 2 massive nebulae, clouds of gas and dust that blocked sensors and made navigation treacherous. It was the fastest route from the outer territories to the Sol system, cutting weeks off the journey time. Every war planner on the Council staff had agreed that this was the optimal invasion route. "Begin transit," Thaxus ordered. "Formation, Alpha 7. I want the dreadnoughts in the center, cruisers on the flanks." Fighters screening ahead, the massive fleet began to file into the corridor. Thousands of ships squeezing through the narrow passage like water through a funnel. The nebulae glowed faintly on either side, beautiful and eerie, their swirling gases lit from within by distant stars. They were halfway through when the first ship exploded. The Krellian cruiser Thunderstrike simply vanished in a ball of fire, torn apart by weapons that seemed to come from nowhere. Before anyone could react, more ships followed, then a dozen, then 100. "What's happening?" Thaxus roared. "Unknown weapons fire from the nebulae, Supreme Commander. We're detecting massive energy signatures. Thousands of them. They were hidden in the gas clouds, ... The nebulae came alive. On both sides of the corridor, Terran warships emerged from hiding like predators rising from the depths of an ocean. They had been waiting for weeks, powered down and invisible, drifting among the gas clouds with the patience of hunters. Now they surged forward, air weapons blazing. Admiral Grace Bennett watched from the bridge of the Constellation as her trap closed around the Council fleet. The timing had been perfect. The enemy was committed to the passage, unable to maneuver, unable to retreat. They were caught in a killing field of her own design. "All ships, engage at will," she ordered calmly. "Priority targets are command vessels and supply ships. Break their spine first, then we'll deal with the rest." The Battle of Kepler Corridor had begun. For Supreme Commander Thaxus, the next 14 hours were a nightmare of fire and chaos. His carefully organized fleet dissolved into a confused mass of ships, trying desperately to defend themselves. The Terran vessels moved with deadly precision, striking from unexpected angles, peering and disappearing into the nebula clouds. Their weapons were more powerful than intelligence had predicted. Their tactics were more sophisticated than any the Council had ever faced. "Get us out of here," Thaxis bellowed. "Signal the retreat!" But retreat was nearly impossible. The corridor was blocked behind them by the wreckage of destroyed ships. The nebulae prevented any escape to the sides. The only way out was forward, through the Terran defensive line. "Concentrate fire on their flagship," Thaxis ordered. "If we can break through their center, ... The Eternal Dominion surged forward, surrounded by the survivors of the Krellian battle group. They poured fire into the Terran formation, destroying several cruisers and damaging a carrier. For a moment, it seemed like they might actually punch through. Then the Constellation appeared directly in their path. Admiral Bennett had positioned her flagship at the center of the defensive line. Knowing that Thaxis would eventually try to break through there, she had been waiting for this moment. "Fire all weapons," she commanded. The Constellation unleashed everything it had: missiles, plasma cannons, railguns, and experimental energy weapons that the Council had never seen before. The Eternal Dominion's shields held for almost 30 seconds before collapsing. The massive dreadnought broke apart under the sustained assault, its hull splitting open like an egg, atmosphere and bodies spilling into the void. Supreme Commander Thaxis died without ever understanding what had happened. With the death of their Supreme Commander, the Council fleet fell into complete chaos. Ships that had been fighting in formation began to scatter. Captains issued contradictory orders. Some vessels attempted to surrender, while others continued fighting blindly. The Terran ships moved among them like wolves among sheep, destroying anything that still showed signs of resistance. By the time it was over, 12,000 Council ships had been destroyed. Another 8,000 were captured or disabled. The survivors fled back toward the border. Pursued by Terran hunter groups that picked off stragglers for days afterward, Admiral Bennett stood on her bridge amid the wreckage of the greatest battle in galactic history. Her uniform was stained with sweat, and her voice was hoarse from hours of issuing commands. Around her, the crew worked in exhausted silence, processing the enormity of what they had accomplished. "Casualty report," she requested. 217 ships destroyed, her tactical officer replied. Another 106 damaged, but repairable. Approximately 40,000 human personnel killed in action. 40,000. Bennett closed her eyes for a moment, honoring the fallen. They had known the risks. They had fought anyway. Their sacrifice had saved humanity. "Begin search and rescue operations," she ordered. "I want every escape pod recovered, every survivor found. And prepare a message for the Council. Tell them that the Terran Empire is prepared to discuss terms." "Discuss terms?" her executive officer asked, surprised. "We won. Why would we negotiate now?" Bennett looked out at the debris field that stretched across the corridor, the shattered remains of the Council's pride. "Because destroying their fleet was just the first step," she replied. "Now we need to make sure they never threaten us again. And for that, we need to show them exactly what they're facing." She turned back to the tactical display where Terran fleet positions were being updated in real time. The Second Fleet had secured the Krellian homeworld. The Third Fleet had neutralized the Valferi orbital defenses. The Fourth Fleet was holding position near Nexus Prime. Itself, the Council had tried to threaten Earth. Now, they were surrounded by the very species they had tried to destroy. The real negotiations were about to begin. Council chamber on Nexus Prime had never been so quiet. Where once the representatives of 12 mighty species had gathered to dictate the fate of younger civilizations, only 8 delegations remained. The Krellians had no government left to represent, their homeworld surrounded by Terran warships. The Valkyrie High Command had collapsed after the death of 3/4 of their military leadership in the Kepler massacre. The Decion Collective had already begun private negotiations with Earth, hoping to salvage something from the disaster. The Mandari had simply stopped responding to communications entirely. High Speaker Zereth stood at his podium, his bioluminescent skin dim and flickering. The patterns that had once blazed with triumph and contempt now pulsed weakly with colors that any student of Valtheri body language would recognize as fear and despair. He had been the one to read the ultimatum 32 days ago. He had been the one to smile as humanity was threatened with extinction. Now he had to face the consequences. The doors of the chamber opened, and Ambassador Catherine Moore walked in. She was not alone this time. Admiral Grace Bennett walked beside her in full dress uniform, every medal and decoration gleaming under the chamber lights. Behind them came an honor guard of Terran Marines, their power armor polished to a mirror shine, their weapons held at ceremonial rest, but clearly ready for use at a moment's notice. Catherine walked to the human delegation podium, the same small island of polished wood where she had stood when receiving the Council's demands. She placed a data chip on the surface and looked around the chamber at the remaining delegates. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," she began, her voice clear and steady, "the Terran Empire has prepared a response to your ultimatum of 32 days ago." No one spoke. No one moved. "You demanded that humanity disarm, surrender our colonies, and submit to permanent occupation. You gave us 30 days to comply or face destruction by your combined fleets." Catherine paused, letting the silence stretch. "We have considered your terms carefully." She touched the data chip. An holographic display appeared above her head, showing the current disposition of Terran military forces. Blue markers surrounded the homeworlds of 4 Council species. Green markers indicated Terran carrier groups holding position near the main shipping lanes. Red markers showed the wreckage of the Council Armada still drifting in the Kepler corridor. "Our response is as follows," Catherine continued. "The Galactic Council will formally recognize Terran sovereignty over all current holdings and any future territorial claims. The Council will pay reparations in the amount of 50 trillion galactic credits, to be distributed over the next 20 standard years. The Council will grant humanity permanent membership with full voting rights, and the Council will agree to a complete restructuring of galactic military protocols. With Terran observers present at all future fleet exercises." Xyrith's skin flared briefly with anger before dimming again. "And if we refuse these terms?" Catherine looked at him without expression. "The Terran Second Fleet is currently holding position 3 light hours from this station. 1 signal from Admiral Bennett, and they will begin their approach. Our Third Fleet has secured the Krellian homeworld and is prepared to begin orbital bombardment if necessary. Our Fourth Fleet has disabled every Valkyrie weapons platform within 12 light-years of their capital." She leaned forward slightly, her eyes never leaving the high speaker's face. "You had 42,000 ships when you crossed into our space. You now have less than 20,000, scattered and leaderless. We lost 200 ships in the battle. We have 4,000 more ready to deploy. This is not a negotiation, High Speaker. This is us telling you what is going to happen." The chamber remained silent. Admiral Bennett stepped forward, her boots clicking on the polished floor. "I want to be very clear about something," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. "Humanity did not want this war. For 3 centuries, we tried to be good neighbors. We traded fairly. We kept our promises. We never threatened anyone. But we also never forgot where we came from." She gestured at the honor guard behind her, the soldiers standing motionless in their gleaming armor. "Our species evolved on a harsh world where survival required constant struggle. We fought predators, diseases, ice ages, and each other. We nearly destroyed ourselves 6 times before we reached the stars. And through all of it, we learned one essential truth. Peace is precious, but it must be defended." Bennett looked around at the alien faces watching her. "You thought we were weak because we chose diplomacy over war. You thought we were naive because we extended friendship instead of threats. You were wrong. We chose peace because we understood the alternative better than any of you ever could. We knew what war meant. We prepared for it while hoping we would never have to use those preparations." She stepped back, yielding the floor to Catherine once again. "These are our terms," Catherine said. "You have 1 hour to accept them. If you refuse, or if you attempt any hostile action against Terran forces or civilians, we will respond with overwhelming force. Not because we enjoy war, but because we will not allow anyone to threaten our people ever again. High Speaker Xerath looked around the chamber at his fellow delegates. The Veshans were already nodding. The remaining Krellian representatives sat in stunned silence. The Mandari ambassador had finally emerged from hiding, her compound eyes dull with defeat. "We will vote," Xerath said quietly. The vote took less than 5 minutes. Every delegation that still had the authority to cast a ballot voted to accept humanity's terms. The council that had sought to destroy the Terran Empire now officially recognized it as an equal partner in galactic affairs. After the session ended, Catherine and Admiral Bennett walked back to their shuttle in silence. The station around them buzzed with activity as alien diplomats rushed to send reports to their governments. As journalists clamored for statements, as military officers processed the reality of their defeat. "Do you think they'll try again someday?" Bennett asked as they boarded the shuttle. Catherine looked out the viewport at the stars, same stars that humanity had dreamed about for thousands of years. "Maybe," she said. "Not soon. We've hurt them badly, and they'll need decades to recover. But eventually, someone will decide that humanity has grown too powerful, or too dangerous, or too different. Someone will convince themselves that they can succeed where the council failed. And when they do, we'll be ready." Catherine turned away from the viewport and sat down in her seat. "That's the burden we carry now. We can never let our guard down. We can never assume that peace will last forever. We have to keep building, keep preparing, keep watching the darkness for threats." Bennett nodded slowly. "Is it worth it? All of this? The war, the death, the constant vigilance?" Catherine thought about her daughter back on Earth, about the billions of humans living their lives across 24 worlds. She thought about all the children who would grow up knowing that their species had faced extinction and survived. She thought about the future, the 1,000 years of possibility that stretched out ahead of humanity. "Yes," she said finally. "It's worth it. Because the alternative is giving up, and humans don't know how to do that. We never have. We probably never will." The shuttle lifted off from the station, carrying them back to the waiting fleet. Behind them, the Galactic Council began the long process of learning to live with their new reality. Treaties would be signed, borders would be redrawn, old alliances would shatter, and new ones would form, and humanity would continue doing what it had always done, surviving, adapting, and reaching for the stars. The Council had tried to threaten Earth, they had learned, at terrible cost, that some species should not be threatened. Some species had been forged in fire and hardened by struggle, till they could face anything the universe threw at them. Humanity was such a species, and they were just getting started. In the years that followed, the Terran Empire grew and prospered. New colonies were founded on worlds that had once been claimed by hostile powers. Trade flourished as former enemies became reluctant partners. The Council slowly transformed from a body that dictated terms to one that negotiated them. With humanity's voice heard clearly in every debate, but the people of Earth never forgot the lesson of those 32 days. They taught their children about the ultimatum, about the secret preparations, about the battle that saved their species. They maintained their fleets and their hidden arsenals. They watched the darkness between stars with careful eyes, and they remained ready, always ready, for the next threat that might emerge from the vast and dangerous galaxy they called home, because that was what it meant to be human. To hope for peace while preparing for war, to extend one hand in friendship while keeping the other near a weapon, to dream of a better future while never forgetting the lessons of the past. The Council had learned this truth the hard way. The galaxy would learn it too in time. Humanity had arrived among the stars, and they intended to stay.